What is going on, men? Urban survival skills. That's what we're going to talk about today, because girls only want guys with sweet skills. I do very few movie references or TV references because I don't have a TV, but back a long time ago in the ancient of days I did, and that's one of the movies I saw. Anyway, let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about survival, guns, tactics, all manner of things. Hopefully keeping God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world firsthand experience. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, hunting, competition shooting background. But first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Getting into stuff more germane to today, I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. I was L.A.P.D. I worked regular and specialized assignments working in some of the nastiest streets in L.A., and by that measure, some of the nastiest streets in the country. I was also an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. That said, I'm much more of a country boy at heart. I'd much rather be in the country. I live in the country. And I mean like very rural. But I do work sometimes in the city. I'm a private security contractor still. And that generally requires me to go to a more populated area. Not always, but most of the time. Oh, and I guess I don't often mention the bio because it's not often germane, but it probably is today. I did quite a bit of executive protection work for A-list celebrities and the biggest of the big names in the music industry, and that often is in large urban areas, as you might imagine. So there are some bona fides or bona fides for talking about urban survival skills. Okay, first and foremost, you need your spiritual and your eternal welfare survival. So just like anywhere else, prayer and reading your Bible, those are important skills no matter where you live. I know you guys probably already know that, but I'm just going to reiterate that here. I don't care where you survive or what you survive. If you die and go to hell, then you didn't win. You didn't do well long term, right? This body of ours is a temporary dwelling for our spirit. So remember that. Remember what's really important. With that, this one is often thought of as a rural skill, a wilderness skill, but it's absolutely a urban survival skill. Foraging. Now, you may be surprised. You might actually find more edible plants in an urban environment or suburban environment than you will in the wilderness. Like wilderness, a lot of times will have very few edible plants, but man-made, artificially constructed flora may be more edible than your general wild stuff. Like if you go to like Northern Rockies, like I'm right near the Sawtooth, I live up in the mountains. You know, in a ponderosa forest, there's not a ton. There's some stuff to eat, but not a lot of bioavailable, like good nutrients there. There are some, and I know where to look for them. But I was walking around in the city recently, and just one of the places I worked, I saw probably half a dozen edible plants in a 100, 200-yard radius. That's a lot more than I'm probably going to find out in the wilderness, because we don't generally plant, I could be wrong, but you don't generally plant poisonous plants that are going to kill you in an urban environment. You generally plant stuff that looks nice and or, has some kind of function. A lot of stuff that people plant as ornamentals are also edible. A lot of plants, or a lot of flowers, rather, like pretty flowers is there. Bulbs and stuff are often edible. Their leaves are often edible. Not always, but often. A lot of times because fruit has a pretty flower, then a lot of times people will plant fruit as a decorative thing just because the flowers look nice. Plums, apples, things like that obviously are edible, but things like crab apples also edible. And I don't know where you live, but that's probably the case. Now, a couple of cautions on this. This is not an advocacy for you to live in the city because there are way more people than there is going to be available food. Also, on the flip side of that, a lot of people are not going to have any idea what they can eat. A lot of people have never eaten anything that didn't come out of a store. So that's something to consider. So you may have an advantage there. Also, a lot of urban places, especially in the southeast and the west, less so in in the East Coast, which I generally don't like because there's too many people. But this is a check mark in that box. They're going to have enough water generally to sustain these plants. A lot of times in the West, especially the Southwest, a lot of these plants are going to die very quickly because they require sprinkler systems, irrigation, and when the grid goes down, that stuff's going to go down. So you'll have a limited window, but at least in that window, foraging absolutely can be an urban skill. Things like dandelions, rose hips, honeysuckle, Oregon grape, Russian thistle. These are things you probably can find in a lot of urban environments that are absolutely edible. So don't just think about that. If you're looking at this for survival and prepping, don't just think, well, I live in an urban area, therefore I can't forage at all. You absolutely can forage. So keep that in mind. Another one, probably more obvious, lock picking. You should know how to pick locks, no matter where you live, even if you live rurally. Learning how to pick locks, it's a great skill, not to do anything nefarious, not to break into somebody's property, right? If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed, says God. So not for breaking anything, but a lot of times you need to get into something that's yours and you lost the key, don't have the key, don't have time to go get the key. You locked yourself out. There's a kid locked in the car accidentally and you locked the keys in the car. Whatever it is, you come across an old padlock on something of yours and you lost the key a long time ago, or you're trying to get out of somewhere, like there's a fire or an active shooter and you need to get out of somewhere. Lock picking can be important, and it's not very hard. You'll actually be quite alarmed once you get decent at lock picking and you realize how easy it is to actually pick a lock. Last time I did it, I think we were watching our neighbor's teenage daughter. And we left her, we went over to her house and we were taking her somewhere and we shut the house and she didn't grab the key and we just assumed. Well, we had to get back in the house and they weren't around. I picked the lock, got into the house. Nothing nefarious, but it saved us having to break a window or something, right? So lock picking, it's an important skill that you'll probably use even if the balloon never hits the fan in our lifetime. Lock picking is a good one. Another good one is breaching. Mechanical breaching. I'm not going to get into sapping and explosive breaching, although I know how to do that. I'm certainly not going to tell you how to do that on a podcast. But just mechanical breaching. I have kicked down a lot of doors in my time. Regular residential doors are alarmingly easy to kick down. They're not hard. So if you think your door is going to stop somebody, if they have any kind of physical strength, it's not going to stop them. It's not hard to kick down a door. If you have an opportunity to kick down some old doors and somewhere that's not vandalism, somewhere that's not going to hurt anything, you should probably try and do that. There is a technique to it. If you've never done it, the first time you try to do it, you're probably not going to do it well. But once you get the technique down and you know where to kick and how to kick, you'll probably do pretty well. So, mechanical breaching. Also things like a hooligan tool, sledgehammers, bolt cutters, there's a right and wrong way to cut through a chain link fence quickly. So, and there's a lot of other ways to do mechanical breaching, but mechanical breaching, that is a skill that you absolutely should have in an urban environment. You're obviously going to have a lot more man-made structures there. So just consider that. Situational awareness. Probably should have put this one after Bible and pray. This one is super important. Obviously, situational awareness. Just knowing your surroundings, not just taking it for granted. Well, I'm in the city, and it's a relatively nice city, so nothing bad's ever going to happen. And put my head in the sand. Situational awareness, having your head on a swivel, being alert, not walking around with your head in your phone. Those kind of things. Situational awareness. Knowing how to read body language, pre-attack indicators. This is a big one. I don't think a lot of people know. If you've been in a lot of fights in your life, then you know. when somebody's, unless they're really well trained, generally people are going to telegraph when they're going to hit you, when they're getting aggressive. It's hard to disguise that. If somebody's really good and they're a good fighter, they will just walk up to you and act like they're, oh, hey, I'm lost, and then just hit you in the face. But most people are going to show some kind of pre-attack indicator. So knowing pre-attack indicators and being able to articulate that if you have to go to court, that is a big one. So pre-attack indicators and situational awareness. Those are a definite urban survival skill. Here's another one. Finding drinking water. You might think of this as like, oh, we got to find a creek or a ditch. Well, in an urban environment, after a bad scenario, those are probably really bad places to look because they're probably going to be contaminated. So places to find water in an urban environment, this is not an all-exclusive list, but the back of a toilet may sound gross, but if you're dying, you'll certainly drink it, and it's probably cleaner than water that's on the ground or in a stream. So back of the toilet water. Also, how to get water out of a water heater if there's no power, no grid, no nothing like that. There's a way on there. They're designed to be able to drain the water out. So knowing how to get water out of a hot water heater, that's a pretty important skill. And there's other places to look for water in urban environments. Forget about the stupid Silcott key. That's not going to help you if the grid's down for long. I wouldn't even worry about it. And there's ways to improvise that and get around that. So I wouldn't even worry about that. But legit places to find clean water in urban environments. That's a skill you should have, and you should know it for your AO, your area of operation. Another one. Perimeter alarms and structure fortification. I should probably break these down, but perimeter alarms, obviously in regular grid up times, security cameras, CCTV, closed circuit TV stuff, security cameras, those are so affordable now, way more than they were years ago. Whether it's a cell signal or Wi-Fi or a closed circuit, that can really, really help your ability to monitor a perimeter, get perimeter alarms. Obviously, there's, secret alarms and audible alarms, depending on your situation, knowing those, and then also just very low tech. When we were in Iraq, and during the war, you might think we had all kinds of high-tech alarms. You know what one of the go-to perimeter alarm systems was? A piece of string with empty cans with rocks in it. That was a good go-to perimeter alarm. You set a couple of strings up at nighttime, or like fishing string that's really hard to see, with a line with a bunch of soda cans with rocks in them. If somebody is going to walk, they're probably going to hit one or more of those strings and set that perimeter alarm off. You'd be surprised at how loud that is, especially at night. So things like low-tech perimeter alarms. You don't need to spend all the money all the time on crazy stuff. That's a pretty good perimeter alarm, or things like it. Just soda cans with rocks in it. You'd be surprised at how well that works. Low-tech, no grid needed, but things like that. Perimeter alert, perimeter alarm systems. That's a good one. Also, just going back to situational awareness, like if you see a bunch of birds like flying up at once, that seems unusual, or a bird here, a bird there, in a line flying up, that's a pretty good indicator that something's approaching your location, right? That's a pretty good, going back to situational awareness, but also an alarm technique. It's a natural alarm system. So that's one to keep your eye on. Structure fortification. Obviously, things like sandbags. If you live in an urban environment, you might want to have some sandbags on hand. But also, you might think of things you don't normally think about, like offensive or defensive gardening. Things like you have a window on the first floor, planting a cactus or a real thick rose bush, depending on where you live, right under the window, so that it's much less, let's say, appetizing for a criminal to crawl through that window. That's one. Stinging nettle, right? As long as you don't have kids, because stinging nettles can be pretty bad, but stinging nettle, right? That usually grows on its own anyway. Planting some of that under your windows, next to your garage window, whatever it is. That's probably going to slow somebody down. So those kind of plants, if you're going to be somewhere long term, if you're going to live somewhere for a while, and those aren't the only ones, you might look at some different ones like that. Real thick, nasty thorn bushes, hedgerow, if you're going to be somewhere a really long time. but planting things like that can discourage people from breaking in, or that can at least alert you. Like somebody gets a face full or even a couple of armfuls of stinging nettle, they're probably going to let you know. So those are things to think about. Here is another big one. Knowing your location. And if you grew up in a fairly small city, you may know every street. But a lot of times, people grow up and they move to a big city to get a better job. And they go the same way generally to and from the store. They go to the same Walmart. If they're highfalutin, they might go to Target. They go to basically the same stores over and over, same way over and over. They go back and forth to work, generally the same way, take the same exits. And that's all well and good, but you need to know your city pretty well. So try and take alternate routes when you're not in a hurry, so you get to know the city and also get in the habit of knowing where you are at any given time. If you're like just following the GPS, when you get out of the car, make sure you look around and read some street signs and addresses. That way, if something goes down, you at least know where you are. If you can call for help in a normal time, at least you know where you are and where to send people. That you're bleeding out dead or dying in a gutter and you have no idea where you are. Yeah, they can track your GPS location on your phone, but it's better if you just know where you are. So just getting in the habit of knowing your location at any given time. That is an important skill. Also, being able to signal. Obviously, today, most of us have cell phones. That's a way to do it. If you don't have cell phones or if there's a major disaster, cell phones may go down. So low-tech stuff like if you have a coordinated group of people or your family, carrying something like a specific color of spray paint in each vehicle that's not common that you can use to signal I was here and I left, or I'm inside this building, that nobody else is going to know what it means, but your family or your mutual assistance group or whatever is going to know what that means. Signaling, very simple, rudimentary stuff like that. That's just one example, but think about ways that you can use signaling, low-tech signaling, as well as, obviously, if you have a cell phone, use it. Gang territory. This is another big one. If you live in any sizable city, whether you think there is or not, there's probably gang activity there. So knowing the gangs that operate in your area, you may be able to find this OSINT, open source intelligence, Google search, DuckDuckGo, whatever. You may just be able to find it that way. You may also just want to talk to local law enforcement whenever you see one out and about, or go into your local police station and say, hey, I just moved here, or hey, I just wanted to know, I live in this area. Where are the gangs that are active in this area or in the city in general? And then do some research on those gangs. If the police is willing to talk to you, a lot of times we'll have a gang task force or a gang, at least one person in the department. If it's a smaller one, that's like the gang person, and talk to them. Like, what are the motorcycle gangs? What are the Hispanic gangs? What are the black gangs? Who does what here? And they'll generally tell you, right? It's open source intelligence generally. They're not going to tell you if they're working on a case on a specific person, but they'll generally tell you what gangs are active in your area. Knowing when you go to a new area and you see something tagged and you're like, oh, this gang is in this area, this is their MO, this is what they do, that's important for you, important for your family, important for your wife, important for your kids. That's an important thing to know. So, obviously, bigger cities are going to have more gangs or more gang rivalries, but even small cities will generally have some organization that runs drugs, that does, things like that. So knowing that, don't just put your head in the sand and pretend there's no gangs because you don't see them day to day. They're kind of like cockroaches. Just because you don't see them day to day doesn't mean they're not everywhere. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of the gang activity. Be aware of it. Who's operating in your area? That's an important one. And then another one, drug recognition. Now, I should have mentioned this in the preamble for my bona fides, but I am a certified drug recognition expert. There's things I can do with that, things I can do like testify in court and stuff with that, but you should at least be familiar with different street drugs, what they look like, what they do, and their signs and symptoms. Like somebody that's on those, what are they exhibiting? A lot of them are, some of them are pretty obvious, especially if they're like a long-time user. Like you can probably look at somebody and tell if they've been on meth for a while. But the acute symptoms, are they high right now? which drugs tend to be violent, which drugs tend to be nonviolent. Now, even somebody that's hooked on a nonviolent drug like heroin could decide to, rob, steal, whatever to get the heroin. But that's a different case than somebody that's on the drug right now, that's under the influence of it, that can be violent right now. So learn about the drugs. As much as you might not want to dive into that world, it's a world that you live in if you live in a city. One of the reasons I don't like cities. But if you live in a city, you're in that world. So you had better kind of know that, right? What are the signs? What are the symptoms? What are the smells? You might know, like, obviously marijuana has a very easy identifiable smell, but so does meth. Not so much the active chemicals, but the stuff they use to make it and the stuff that's in it as a byproduct has a very distinct smell. And once you have smelt it, once you've been in like a meth house, you know that smell and you'll never forget it. You might be walking around a city block and just smell it and be like, oh yeah, there's somebody is, currently high on meth here. I can smell it. So knowing things like that, being somewhat familiar with them. Obviously the easy ones, marijuana is pretty easy and not a super violent one, but that's just an obvious one because you probably know the symptoms. You probably know somebody that has used it. If you haven't yourself, you kind of know what somebody that's high on marijuana looks like. But other ones, to you, if you've lived a fairly sheltered life, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's probably less obvious. Methamphetamines, opiates, opioids, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, things like that. Know what's common in your area and know the signs and symptoms of people that are on those. But I would definitely count that as like a modern urban survival skill. Going back to the police thing and talking to the police or just checking maps. Again, a lot of this is open source intelligence. So high crime areas in your city. Even if it's not where you live, how far is it from where you live? What's the easiest way for them to get to where they are to where you live? But knowing the high crime areas in your city, generally to avoid them day to day, or if you do have to go there because it's the only, used tire shop in your area and that's all you can afford, at least knowing that, like knowing the high crime areas in your city, knowing if there are certain areas that are high for violent crime. Property crime too, but obviously that's, you can buy more property, you can't buy your life back. So, or a vicious assault or something like that. So knowing your high crime areas in your city. Again, a lot of these will be stats and, again, talking to local law enforcement. So keep an eye out for the high crime areas in your city, being able to read a crime map. So that's, looking for patterns. Pattern recognition will work for this pretty well, but that's just a skill you should have and knowledge you should have for your city. Another one may seem unusual, but geometry. That's really a lot of urban warfare is geometry. And I'm not going to get into room clearing and stuff. One, because audio is not the place for that, but also like things like room clearing and things like that, you really need a lot of training for that. And I don't just mean like a little bit of training like I saw it on YouTube University, so I'm basically an expert. I mean actually doing it a lot, right? Even I mentioned I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Even with highly trained Marines with combat experience that have, I can't recall the number of hours we spent training and retraining and doing all the stuff and getting to know everybody on the team and working together. And even with that, room clearing in an urban environment with somebody that wants to kill you is a dicey proposition. So I'm not advocating you go out and do that. But if you are, you need actual training, not YouTube training, not like I've got an 11-inch AR, so I'm basically a CQB expert. You're not. It takes a lot of training. So if you want to go that route, get some CQB training, do some force on force at least, do some, I'm not talking airsoft, I'm talking about actually like a tactical class, like a fighting carbine class, doing, force on force, shooting each other with sim rounds. So things like that. If you want to go down that route, you certainly can. But the precursor to that is knowing geometry, like knowing not to hug up on cover, knowing to keep your distance from cover, working angles, knowing how to maximize cover or concealment if it's all you have, but knowing how to utilize those and maximize those to your advantage. It's just geometry. It's basic geometry. That is absolutely an urban survival skill. there's a lot in this. There's a lot to dissect in this. And obviously, I just hit on the skills. I could probably do an episode on several of those skills alone. So this is kind of a cursory overview. If you're just getting into prepping survival and you live in an urban environment, those are some places you might want to start looking for skill. Skill is more important than the stuff. No matter how much stuff you have, it can be taken away. It can be lost. And if you're still alive, that's great. You need the skills. So these are some urban survival skills that you may want to look into. Seems like a lot of this was tips. I mentioned it briefly, but I'm going to use it as the tactical tip of the day again. Don't always take the same way. Unless you're going to be late for work, or especially when you're going home, you're not on a set time limit. Try and take different routes. Try and learn different ways. Don't always take the freeway. Don't always take the same exit. Take different ones on purpose, not accidentally because you missed your exit. Obviously, if you miss your exit, pay attention, situational awareness, and learn some new stuff. But try and do a meandering, less precise route. So you know different parts of the city or different places and different routes. So that's a good tactical tip to do. Pay attention to any resources or anything important in that area. Or, again, gang activity, drug activity, things like that. Pay attention. And that's going to bring us to the tactical verse of the day. Part of Deuteronomy 28, blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. There are many blessings in Deuteronomy 28 for the people that follow God. You might want to look at Deuteronomy 28. It's a great chapter. But blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. And I hope that you are blessed and have a blessed day.